Hello guys. So if you have worked with monitoring or observability tools, you have probably wondered at some point, why does this feel so complicated? Why do logs live in one tool, metrics somewhere else, and traces in yet another place? Why does every vendor insist on their own agent, their own SDK, and their own way of collecting data? And more importantly, why does changing tools feel harder than changing cloud providers? It turns out the problem wasn't dashboards, it wasn't alerting systems, it wasn't even the complexity of distributed systems. The real issue was telemetry fragmentation. No shared way to collect, format, or move data. So, in the last episode, we explored the idea of monitoring versus observability, where monitoring tells you something is wrong and observability helps you understand why it's happening. But here's the catch. Do understand why you need unified telemetry, logs, metrics, and traces that can speak the same language. And for a long time, that didn't exist. Before OpenTelemetry, telemetry collection was messy, vendor driven, inconsistent, and extremely hard to scale. So, in this episode, we are going to take a step back and understand the landscape that existed before OpenTelemetry. We will break down how telemetry started, how it evolved, the problems it created, and how standardization became the missing piece. And by the end, you'll clearly see why OpenTelemetry wasn't just one another tool, it was necessary. So let's start with the question, what is telemetry? Telemetry isn't new. The word originally comes from aerospace and engineering. Think of a spacecraft orbiting Earth. Engineers can't physically check its temperature, fuel levels, or engine health. So the spacecraft records measurements and transmits them remotely. That transmitted data is nothing but telemetry. So now let's replace the spacecraft with a modern e-commerce system. When someone visits the website, many layers spring into action. The application code. The application code might have a cart, a checkout, a login. All these microservices will be distributed. Then there will be system libraries. System calls will be made. Then kernel and OS will be involved, wherein the system calls will be made. Then there will be few containers and VM across the distributed system. Also, underlying hardware, cloud resources will be involved, like EC2 databases, queues, storage. All these layers generate signals, performance, errors, latency, events, resource usage. Together, this is all telemetry. Once telemetry is collected, it moves into dashboards and tools. Metrics dashboards. Grafana and Prometheus come into play. Log explorers like ELK Stack, Splunk, tracing backends, Jaeger, Zipkin. This is where observability becomes useful, when telemetry becomes something humans can understand. But this is also where challenges began. So this led to, like, logs had one tool, metrics had another, traces had another, different agents, different formats, different SDKs, and different vendors like Open Tracing, Open Sensors, Zipkin, Jaeger, vendor specific agents. Everyone had their own way. Teams were collecting telemetry, but it was siloed. To reduce complexity, many companies consolidated everything under one vendor. One vendor agent, one dashboard, one backend. At first, this worked well, but soon teams realized something. They weren't consolidating observability, they were consolidating dependency. Changing vendors meant rewriting instrumentation, and that meant pain. So if you choose vendor A, you used vendor A's agent, formats, and SDKs. If you later wanted vendor B, you need to rip the entire system or settings that you made for vendor A, replace them, re-instrument, and then redeploy it again. Telemetry wasn't portable, and that limited innovation. So, to get rid of all this confusion and pain, a new idea emerged. What if applications didn't talk directly to vendor backend? What if they talked to a standard neutral layer first? A layer where telemetry is collected once, converted into a common format, sent to any backend or multiple backends simultaneously. One of the biggest breakthroughs OpenTelemetry brought to the table is decoupling telemetry generation from telemetry storage. Before OpenTelemetry, your monitoring stack looked like this: an application, a vendor agent, and a vendor backend. So if you wanted to switch from Datadog to Splunk or from Prometheus to New Relic, you couldn't just flip a switch. You had to reinstall agents, re-instrument code, reconfigure exporters, sometimes rewrite your dashboards, and rebuild alert rules from scratch. It was painful. Your telemetry was locked to the vendor, like being tied into a phone charger that only works with one brand. OpenTelemetry changes that model. Now, the pipeline looks like application, OpenTelemetry collector, and any destinations. The collector becomes a neutral broker over here, this one. A middle layer that receives telemetry in a standardized format and then routes it to whatever backend you choose. So instead of locking data to one tool, you have one pipeline with infinite flexibility. Now, let's imagine a real situation. You have a well-established stack running. Your traces are in Jaeger, metrics in Prometheus, and logs in Elasticsearch. But now, leadership at your organization wants Datadog dashboards. In the old world, this could take weeks. With OpenTelemetry, it becomes update the collector config, add Datadog as an exporter, restart the collector. No code changes are required. No redeploying of the app. No rewriting instrumentation. The thing that took weeks in the past will be done in minutes now with this framework. And the best part, you can send the same telemetry to multiple backends at once. For example, Datadog for dashboards, S3 for compliance retention, Grafana for engineering, ClickHouse for cost efficient long term storage. This makes your telemetry portable. Your data is not tied to any single vendor or agent. Reusable. The same data can be used to power many different tools and use cases. Future proof. Tooling can change. Data format doesn't. Your instrumentation remains constant, even if the backend tools change or evolve. So when we say one pipeline, many destinations, what we really mean is this. With OpenTelemetry, your data belongs to you, not the tool. The collector gives us optionality, flexibility, and freedom, and that unlocks true observability without vendor locking. So, with OpenTelemetry at the helm, you instrument your code only once. A single hotel collector receives all your telemetry data, logs, metrics, and traces in a standard format. From there, you decide where to go, which vendor to send. With this approach, it results in true freedom. You control your data, not the vendors, because your instrumentation is based on an open standard. You can switch, add, or consolidate backends without re-instrumenting your applications. You can perform a bake-off between two vendors by sending the same data to both simultaneously. The power shifts from vendor back to you. So, to summarize, why OpenTelemetry matters. It helps collect logs, metrics, and traces in a standard format. This format we can use to avoid vendor lock-in. Works with all the existing tools. Also helps us send data to multiple destinations at once. Enables future-friendly observability architecture. Yes, so telemetry used to lock us in. What OpenTelemetry did was it set us free. So thanks for tuning in. See you in the next episode. Thank you.